The afternoon sun hung low over Cedar Bluff, turning the street dust into gold. The air was dry enough to sting the nose. From the edge of town, a single rider appeared, tall, steady, and silent. His horse was jet black, muscles tense beneath a worn saddle. The man's name was Isaiah Cole. He rode down Main Street without a word. Every door creaked open just enough for someone to peek through. Mothers pulled their children inside. A pair of old men outside the barbershop stopped talking and pretended to sweep. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic thud of hooves on dirt. Isaiah didn't blame them for staring. A black man on a horse in a white town, that alone was enough to make folks whisper. But he wasn't here to prove anything. He came for a bounty, a job like any other. He stopped outside the saloon, the biggest building in town. The sign above it read Silver Spur, half of its letters burned off by time and wind. Isaiah dismounted, tied his horse to the post, and checked the revolver on his hip, not out of pride but habit. The steel was cool under his fingertips. When he pushed open the saloon doors, every conversation inside went dead. A deck of cards froze mid-air. The piano player's hands lifted from the keys. Isaiah's boots hit the floorboards with a dull sound, each step echoing through the silence. He kept his eyes forward, shoulders loose but ready. He'd been in rooms like this before. Rooms where he wasn't wanted, where a man had to count how many guns were pointed at his back before he turned around. He stopped at the bar. The bartender, a pale, thick man with red hands, avoided eye contact. "What'll it be?" the man asked, voice dry. "Water," Isaiah said. The bartender frowned. "Ain't got much call for that. I'll pay double." The man shrugged, filled a glass from a jug and slid it over. Isaiah took it, drank slow. The water was warm and bitter, but it cleared the trail dust from his throat. From the corner, a few cowhands watched him, whispering low. One of them smirked. "Ain't he something?" he muttered loud enough to be heard. "Dresses like a man, drinks like a preacher." Isaiah didn't turn. He'd learned that silence could be more dangerous than words. He finished the glass, placed a coin on the counter, and looked up. That's when he saw her. She was standing at the top of the staircase, Clara Whitfield. She looked no older than 23, wearing a soft blue dress with the sleeves rolled just above her wrists. Her hair was pinned, a few strands loose from the heat. Her eyes, clear and uncertain, stayed fixed on him. Isaiah had seen plenty of looks before: disgust, suspicion, pity. Hers wasn't any of those. It was curiosity. Honest, quiet curiosity. He held her gaze for a second, maybe two. Long enough for the air to feel heavy. Then a man behind her spoke, an older voice, sharp. "Clara, come down from there." She blinked, startled, and turned away. The sound of her footsteps faded up the hall. Isaiah looked back at the bar. The room's noise returned slowly, laughter, whispers, the shuffle of cards. But something in him stayed still. He didn't know why that girl's face stuck in his mind. Maybe because she hadn't looked at him like everyone else did. Maybe because it had been a long time since anyone looked at him like he mattered. He stepped out of the saloon, the evening sun now touching the roofs. The horse flicked its tail as he untied the reins. His jaw tightened. He could already feel the tension in the air, the kind that warned a man trouble was coming. But for now, he rode toward the edge of town, trying to let the image of her fade from his thoughts. It didn't. That night, as he made camp by the dry creek bed, he caught himself thinking about her again. The blue dress, the calm eyes, the way she didn't flinch. He'd been in this world long enough to know better. Town girls and men like him didn't cross paths twice. And if they did, someone always got hurt. Still, when he lay back and watched the stars blink through the dust, he muttered under his breath, almost ashamed of it. Clara Whitfield. Then he closed his eyes, and the desert wind covered the sound of her name. The next morning, Cedar Bluff woke slow. Dust hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Isaiah had already been in the saddle for hours, tracking the man whose face was on the wanted poster folded in his coat pocket. Tobias Reed, wanted for robbery and murder. The trail led nowhere. Just dry brush, rattlesnakes, and the endless stretch of sun. By the time he rode back into town, the heat shimmered off the roofs. His horse stumbled slightly near the trough outside the general store. Isaiah dismounted and knelt to check its leg. The left front hoof was bleeding, a nail bent deep into the shoe. He cursed under his breath. "You pushed too hard, didn't you, girl?" The animal huffed, shaking its head. Isaiah sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. He could patch many things, wounds, leather, even pride, but not a split hoof. He needed a farrier. The closest one was at the Whitfield Ranch, a few miles north of town. He'd seen the name carved into the wooden gate on his way in the day before. He thought about leaving it for morning. But the horse's limp told him otherwise. By late afternoon he reached the ranch. White fences stretched out toward the hills, and a big red barn stood at the center. Isaiah dismounted carefully and led his horse to the stable. The place smelled of hay, horses, and warm wood. He was about to call out when he heard movement inside. A voice, calm, low, familiar. "Careful, she's hurt," the voice said. Clara Whitfield stepped from behind a stall door, holding a bucket of water. Sunlight hit her face through the slats in the wall, showing a smear of dust on her cheek. She froze when she saw him, eyes widening. "You," she said softly. He nodded once. "Ma'am?" For a moment neither spoke. Only the sound of the horse's uneven breathing filled the air. Then Clara set the bucket down and walked closer. "What happened to her?" "Stone on the trail," Isaiah said. "Split the hoof." "Let me see." He hesitated, then stepped aside. She knelt beside the horse's leg, gentle but sure in her movements. Her fingers brushed the animal's flank, steadying it. "She's favoring it bad," Clara said. "You did right bringing her in. My father's in town, but I know enough to help." Isaiah crouched beside her, watching how she worked. Her dress was rolled at the sleeves again, hands stained slightly from dirt and oil. She didn't look like the kind of woman who spent her life at a vanity mirror. "Didn't think a rancher's daughter fixed hooves," he said. She smiled faintly. "Didn't think a bounty hunter would ask for help." The air between them shifted, quiet, a little tense, not dangerous but alive. She didn't move away when his arm brushed hers. He noticed the small scar on her wrist, like an old burn. "You ever been hurt working like this?" "More than once," she said. "But it's honest work. Pain you can understand." He understood that more than she could know. She finished cleaning the wound, then reached for a small hammer and nail. "Hold her still." Isaiah steadied the horse's neck, his hand close to Clara's. The smell of her hair mixed with hay and sweat, faint but clean. She tapped the nail carefully, her breath steady, lips pressed together in focus. When she was done, she stood up and wiped her hands on her apron. "That'll hold for now," she said. "She'll limp for a few days but she'll heal." He looked at her, meaning it when he said, "Thank you." Clara's eyes softened. "People here don't talk to you much, do they?" Isaiah exhaled, half a laugh. "They talk plenty. Just not to my face. That's their loss." The words came quiet, almost to herself, but he heard them. He stepped back, not wanting to make the moment harder than it already was. "I should pay you." "You don't need to. I don't take charity." "Then consider it payment for the way you kept your temper in the saloon yesterday," she said with a small smile. "That's worth something around here." He almost smiled back. Almost. The sound of hoofbeats outside broke the moment. Clara turned toward the door, tension crossing her face. "My father's back," she whispered. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He reached for his hat, lowering it over his eyes. "I'll be gone before he sees me. You don't have to rush." "Yes, I do." He led his horse out the back of the barn, careful not to leave tracks near the main gate. Clara followed him just to the edge of the pasture. "Will you come back for the shoe in a few days?" she asked. He hesitated. The question sounded simple, but it wasn't. "I'll think about it." "Do," she said quietly. He mounted his horse, turned toward the open road, then looked back at her once. The wind caught her hair as she stood there, not scared, not ashamed, just watching him go. That night, back at his campfire, Isaiah found himself staring at the stars again. He tried to tell himself it was nothing. Just kindness from someone who didn't know better. But part of him knew she did know. And that made it dangerous. The morning after the stable, Cedar Bluff looked the same as it always did. Sunburned streets, slow horses tied outside the saloon, and the creak of a wooden sign in the dry wind. But Isaiah felt the difference. Was in the stairs. He walked down Main Street toward the sheriff's office, hat low, coat brushing the dust. Men paused mid-conversation. A few women turned away quickly, pretending not to notice him. It wasn't new. He'd lived under that weight before. But this time it carried something else. A sharper edge, more eyes, more whispers. "Don't look now," someone muttered near the general store. "That's him. The colored bounty man." "Yeah, the one Miss Whitfield helped." "Helped?" a second voice snorted. "You mean invited him in?" Isaiah didn't stop walking. He kept his hands at his sides, breathing slow, focused on the sheriff's sign ahead. But every step tightened his jaw. Inside the office, Sheriff Halden Briggs looked up from his desk. The man's silver badge gleamed even in the dim light. His voice came lazy, practiced. "Well, look what the desert blew in," Briggs said. "You find your man?" "Not yet," Isaiah answered. Funny. Folks say you've been spending time somewhere else. Whitfield Ranch, wasn't it? Isaiah's eyes narrowed slightly. My horse threw a shoe. Ah. Briggs leaned back in his chair. Guess you needed a lady's touch to fix it, huh? The room went quiet except for the creak of Briggs' chair. Isaiah didn't rise to it. He'd seen men like this before, using words like knives. You got something to say, Sheriff, say it plain? Briggs smiled thinly. I'm just saying, some folks don't like the idea of their women getting friendly with outsiders. Especially your kind. The silence after that line was heavy. Isaiah stared at him for a few seconds, jaw locked, then turned to leave. Don't wander too far, Briggs called out. If Reed shows up, I'll need you here. Isaiah didn't answer. He walked back out into the sunlight, the door slamming shut behind him. That afternoon, Clara was in the saloon's back room, checking on supply lists for her father. The place smelled of whiskey and wood polish. Piano music floated faintly from the front room. When she stepped outside, she heard the same whispers. She's got nerve, I'll give her that. She'll ruin her family's name if she keeps it up. You think she cares? That bounty man's been by her ranch again. Clara froze in place. Her pulse kicked faster. She looked up to see a few of the townswomen glancing her way, pretending to busy themselves with laundry lines. She swallowed hard and kept walking. But their words stayed with her all the way back to the ranch. By sunset, her father, Henry Whitfield, was waiting by the porch, a broad man with gray in his beard and suspicion in his eyes. Clara, he said, voice low but firm, Sheriff Briggs came by this afternoon. Told me you've been keeping company with that bounty hunter. Her throat tightened. I haven't, I mean he just needed help. That's not what folks are saying. I don't care what they're saying. Her father's eyes hardened. You should. You think you can walk through this town and not have every man talking about it? You're a Whitfield. That name still means something. It means I'm supposed to pretend I didn't see a man bleed in front of me just because he's black? The words came out sharper than she intended. Her father's jaw set. He turned toward the fields, voice cold. You sound like your mother. Always leading with your heart, not your head. Clara bit her lip and looked away. Maybe that's not the worst thing. That night, Isaiah camped near the river a few miles out. The sky was wide and cold. His horse grazed quietly nearby, the repaired hoof holding steady. He sat by the fire, eating jerky, thinking about the way Clara looked when she said, "Then let's stop dreaming and just live." He tried not to. He knew where it led, nowhere good. He'd seen men lose everything over less than a look, less than a word. But damn if her voice didn't echo in his head. He threw another stick into the fire, watching sparks drift up. Somewhere out there he knew Reed was still running free. But the bounty didn't feel like the main fight anymore. Not when the whole town was starting to turn. The next morning, as Isaiah was saddling his horse, he heard a distant gunshot. Then another. The sound came from the northern ridge, near the Whitfield Ranch. He grabbed his rifle, mounted fast, and kicked the horse into motion. The trail blurred under him as he rode hard through the rising heat. When he reached the edge of the ranch, he saw smoke coming from the barn. A wagon overturned. Cattle scattering. Clara stood near the fence, trying to calm a spooked horse. Her face was streaked with dirt and fear. Isaiah dismounted before the horse stopped moving. You all right? She turned, breathless but steady. Outlaws. They hit us trying to take the cattle. My father's chasing them. Which way? West Ridge. He was already moving. Clara called out after him, Isaiah, don't? He didn't stop. The bounty hunter in him had taken over. The ridge outside Cedar Bluff was hot by mid-morning, the sun beating down on Isaiah's back as he followed the faint tracks of the outlaws who had attacked the Whitfield Ranch. Dust and dry grass scraped at his boots as he moved quickly but carefully, scanning the horizon. He could hear the distant shouts of the Whitfields, horns blaring, the occasional crack of a rifle in the distance. Clara had done her best to hold the ranch together in the chaos, but he knew she hadn't had a chance to get far. His stomach tightened at the thought of her in danger. Isaiah spotted movement near a small ravine. A group of 3 men, one on a gray horse, the other 2 running with bundles of stolen goods. He crouched behind a low outcrop of rock, rifle ready. He counted heads, assessed distances, calculated his approach. One misstep could cost him or worse Clara. He moved fast, silent, approaching the outlaws from behind. His boots pressed into the loose dirt, careful, precise. The first man didn't notice until Isaiah's rifle was on him. Drop it, Isaiah said, voice low but hard. The man froze and Isaiah fired a warning shot into the dirt. Dust exploded at the man's feet. The second outlaw whipped around, reaching for a pistol, but Isaiah had already moved. He tackled the man to the ground, using his weight to control him without firing. The third man bolted, sprinting down the slope. Isaiah chased, heart hammering, adrenaline sharp. He caught the man near a wash, grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. The outlaw hissed in pain, trying to kick free. "You're done," Isaiah said, keeping his voice steady, watching the man's chest heave. Meanwhile, back in town, Sheriff Briggs had gotten wind of the attack. He arrived at the ranch moments after the outlaws scattered. The barn had been set partially on fire in the skirmish, and the Whitfields were frantically trying to save livestock. Briggs' eyes locked on Isaiah when he rode back into town. "Cole," he said, voice sharp, "we have a problem." Isaiah's chest tightened. He had expected resistance from the sheriff, but not this. "What now?" he asked. Briggs leaned on his desk, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Someone reported the fire, someone died. A bystander, a man who wandered in. You were spotted near the scene." Isaiah froze, fists tightening on the reins of his horse. His jaw set. "I was tracking the outlaws. I didn't kill anyone." Briggs shook his head, lips tight. "That's not how it looks. A witness says they saw a black man near the barn just before the fire. The town believes you did it." Isaiah's stomach sank. He knew this town. He knew how fast fear and prejudice could twist a story into an accusation. He glanced around. The sheriff's office felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were pressing in. Every movement felt heavy, every word measured. "I don't have time for your lies," Isaiah said, voice low but steady. "I've got people to protect." "Protecting isn't going to save you now," Briggs said, leaning back. "They want you hung, Cole. They don't care if it's true." Later that evening, Isaiah returned to the river where he had camped before, the weight of the false accusation pressing down on him. He lit the fire slowly, careful with the dry brush. His hands trembled slightly, more from frustration than fear. He couldn't hide the thought of Clara. What if the town turned violent toward her? She was already brave, but she was human. And she had already risked too much for him. As he stared into the fire, he weighed his options. Ride out of town and disappear? That would save his life but leave Clara vulnerable. Stay and fight the accusation? That would put him in direct conflict with Briggs, the townsfolk, and every armed man willing to chase a black bounty hunter through the streets. He knew his choice before he even finished thinking it. He would not leave her. He would not let her be hurt. Clara, meanwhile, had returned to the Whitfield homestead after helping the ranch hands secure the barn and animals. Her hands were black with soot, her dress ripped at the hem, hair clinging to her sweaty forehead. But she had noticed something in the chaos. The way Isaiah handled himself, the calm decisiveness under fire. Her chest tightened with something she didn't want to name. Fear for him, yes. Admiration, yes. And something deeper that made her pulse race when she remembered how his eyes had stayed focused, unshaken, even when the world around him had fallen apart. She leaned against the barn post, brushing the dust from her hands, thinking about the way he had moved, the way he had risked himself for others, even strangers. She knew, in that moment, she would follow him anywhere. By the time the night fell over Cedar Bluff, Isaiah had packed a small bag. He knew he couldn't stay in town, not with the sheriff ready to frame him for murder. But he also knew that leaving Clara behind was not an option. The fire crackled in the quiet dark, casting flickering shadows across his weathered face. His mind ran through plans for the escape, routes through the desert, safe places he had known from his days as a soldier. Each decision was measured, calculated, necessary. And somewhere in the back of his thoughts, Clara's face appeared again, calm, resolute, courageous. He realized then that the danger was not just from the sheriff or the town, but from what he was beginning to feel. And he wasn't sure he could stop it. The moon was low and pale as Isaiah led his horse quietly out of the back gate of the Whitfield ranch. Clara followed, mounted on her father's spare mare. Every sound of hooves on dry dirt felt loud in the night. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, but it also carried danger. The sheriff's men could be anywhere. Clara's hands trembled on the reins and she noticed it herself. She had never ridden this fast at night, never escaped gunfire or suspicion. Isaiah's eyes flicked to her, calm and alert, scanning the shadows ahead. "You're doing fine," he said quietly, voice steady. "Keep your horse straight, don't look down." "I'm fine," she whispered, though her chest felt tight. He glanced at her again, noting the sweat on her brow, the grip of her fingers on the leather. She was trying to appear composed, but the tension radiated off her. He didn't comment further. He knew words could break concentration. Every second counted. Behind them, faint sounds of barking dogs and shouting drifted over the ridge. The sheriff's men were already searching the outskirts of the town. Isaiah tightened his jaw. He had chosen a route through the rocky gullies north of Cedar Bluff, narrow, winding, and hard to follow. He slowed for a moment at a dry creek bed, listening. Clara's eyes scanned the shadows, wide and anxious. "They're not on us yet," he said. "But they'll catch the trail if we're not careful." She swallowed hard. "Do we have to keep running forever?" Isaiah shook his head. "No. We just have to get to the canyon. Once we're there, I can lose them." His tone was calm, but his mind was racing. Every ridge, every rock, every turn could mean ambush. The canyon was narrow, walls rising like silent sentinels on either side. Isaiah guided their horses slowly, cautiously. The shadows of the rocks made it almost impossible for anyone to see them from a distance. He dismounted and crouched, checking the horse's hooves. "Here," he said to Clara. "Tie your reins to the saddle horn for a moment. We'll move quietly from here." She obeyed, but hesitated as he took her hand to guide her down a sloping rock path. Their hands brushed, fingers briefly lingering longer than necessary. Clara felt a jolt, a mix of fear and something she couldn't name, and tried to focus on the rocky path ahead. Isaiah noticed her flinch and gave her a brief, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't comment. He couldn't. There was no room for distraction. The sound of hooves echoed faintly behind them. One of the sheriff's men had caught part of the trail. Isaiah froze, pressing Clara against the canyon wall. "Stay down," he whispered. His hand brushed hers again as he adjusted her position. This time she didn't pull away. A rider passed above them, shouting orders. Isaiah waited until the echo faded before leading Clara further down the canyon. Each step was measured, calculated. He could feel her heartbeat against his arm, rapid, nervous, alive. By the time they reached a narrow bend, the horses were sweating and tired. Isaiah removed his hat and ran a hand over his forehead. Clara watched him, realizing just how intense his focus was, how every nerve in his body was tuned to the moment. "You're remarkable," she said softly. He paused, looking at her, faint amusement in his eyes. "Remarkable enough to get yourself killed?" "No," she said quickly. "But I trust you." That stopped him. Trust wasn't something he often received, especially in towns like Cedar Bluff. He studied her for a moment, weighing the danger of admitting anything else. Instead he only nodded. Night deepened, and they made camp in a small alcove of the canyon. Isaiah built a small fire, careful to keep smoke low. Clara tended the horses nearby, hands brushing against his as they passed buckets of water. Each touch lingered, unspoken tension building between them. She dared a glance at him. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Isaiah didn't answer at first, eyes on the fire. "More than once." His voice was flat, calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. Then he looked at her. "You're safe now. That's what matters." Clara's chest tightened at the words. She wanted to say something, to reach out, to close the distance between them, but fear and caution held her back. The night was quiet except for the horses and the faint crackle of fire. Yet in that silence their proximity was electric. Her shoulder brushed his as she knelt to untie a rope. Isaiah noticed, didn't move away. He wasn't sure if he should be guiding her, warning her, or letting this moment exist. He simply kept his gaze on the fire, letting the space between them speak what words could not. Hours later, as she drifted toward sleep beside the fire, Clara felt the weight of the day pressing down. Danger, adrenaline, exhaustion, but also something softer, warmer. She watched Isaiah from the corner of her eye, his profile outlined by firelight, strong and still. He wasn't just protecting her body, he was protecting the life they had risked by stepping out of town. And for the first time she realized the truth. Her heart was already caught in the canyon, in the desert, and with him. Isaiah, meanwhile, sat awake longer, thinking about the sheriff, the bounty, and the trail still ahead. But another thought persisted, unbidden. Clara's presence beside him, her courage and the quiet defiance in her gaze. It was dangerous. But he couldn't stop feeling it. He closed his eyes only briefly, listening to the desert night. Tomorrow would bring more running, more decisions, more danger. But tonight, for a fleeting few hours, they had each other, and that small truth was enough to keep them moving forward. The desert was silent except for the occasional cry of a coyote and the wind rattling dry brush. Isaiah had chosen a small hollow for their camp, surrounded by low sandstone ridges. It was hidden from the main trail, a perfect spot to rest without fear of being spotted by the sheriff's men. Clara knelt by the horses, checking their legs and watering them from a small leather pouch. Dust clung to her hair and dress, but her movements were deliberate and steady. She had learned quickly that panic helped no one. Isaiah sat near the fire he had built, sharpening his knife. The sound of the blade scraping the whetstone was rhythmic, almost meditative, but his eyes scanned the horizon with constant alertness. Every shadow made him tense. Every gust of wind made him flinch slightly. The desert offered no second chances. Clara stood, brushing the sweat and dust from her arms. "You should rest," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll sleep when the trail is clear," Isaiah replied without looking up. His hands moved automatically, but his mind was already calculating the next move, the safest route to keep them away from the town and the bounty hunters. She approached the fire slowly. "I don't want to sleep," she admitted. "I need to know you're, safe." Isaiah finally looked at her. The firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the lines of tension, the faint scar above his cheekbone. He noticed the way she held herself, exhausted but unyielding. "You're worried," he said. "Not a question. An observation." "I am," she whispered. Her eyes met his, steady despite the fatigue. "And I can't help it." Isaiah set the knife down, leaning back on his elbows. "Then you're human." "So am I." The simplicity of it made her pause. No words about judgment, no need for explanations. Just acknowledgement. Clara knelt beside him, hands brushing the fire's embers as if trying to ground herself. "Why do you keep going?" she asked softly. "Even when the town wants to see you hanged, even when danger is everywhere?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead he stared into the fire, thinking. Fear had followed him his entire life, in the army, as a bounty hunter, through every town he had ever entered. But this was different. "It's not about them," he said finally, voice low. "It's about not leaving people behind. People like you." Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't expected the admission to carry weight like that. Her hand lingered near his, hesitant. She wanted to reach out but also feared breaking the fragile barrier between them. "Thank you," she whispered. Isaiah's gaze flicked to her, then down to where her fingers hovered near his. He didn't pull away. The air between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words, danger and desire restrained by circumstance. A rustle in the brush made them both tense. Isaiah grabbed his rifle instinctively, and Clara's hand brushed against his arm as she leaned close. The sound was nothing, a desert rabbit fleeing, but the shared alertness pulled them into proximity. Isaiah lowered his weapon slowly, eyes scanning her face. "You're not used to this," he said softly. "I'm learning," she admitted. "With you." The admission carried weight. Isaiah didn't respond with words. Instead, he shifted slightly closer, careful not to alarm her or the horses. Their shoulders touched briefly, a subtle, grounding contact. Clara felt heat rise in her chest, her hands gripping the hem of her skirt as if to anchor herself. Minutes passed in quiet tension. Isaiah broke the silence, his voice steady but softer than before. "Clara, when this is over, you need to know I won't leave you." Her eyes widened slightly. "You can't promise that," she said. Her voice wavered, caught between hope and fear. "I can try," he said simply. His hand moved a fraction, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. It lingered longer than necessary and Clara's breath caught. They stayed like that, close, quiet, listening to the desert night around them. Each heartbeat, each subtle movement carried meaning. The danger wasn't gone, the sheriff's men were still hunting them, the desert itself was unforgiving, but for the first time, Clara felt like they could face it together. Isaiah finally leaned back, resting his head on his hand, eyes still on the fire. Clara sat down beside him, careful to keep a respectful distance, yet close enough that their knees touched. No words were needed. The fire crackled, the desert night held them, and for the first time since leaving Cedar Bluff, both felt the fragile comfort of shared trust. But Isaiah remained alert, scanning the horizon in between moments of stillness. He knew the peace would not last. Danger was never far in the west. And yet, for now, he allowed himself a single, quiet thought. She is worth the risk. The desert heat was relentless, even in the late afternoon. Isaiah and Clara moved cautiously through a narrow wash, the walls of sandstone cliffs on either side keeping their horses from straying. Every sound, the rustle of a lizard, the scrape of hooves against rock, made Isaiah flinch. "They're close," he whispered, glancing back. His eyes scanned the horizon, muscles tensed like coiled springs. Clara, riding beside him, felt the tension and mirrored it instinctively. Her fingers tightened on the reins, knuckles white. "How can you tell?" she asked softly. "They don't run silently," he said. His jaw tightened. Someone out there wants to find us and they're willing to scare off anyone who gets in their way. Clara swallowed hard. Fear pressed into her chest, but so did a strange surge of determination. She wasn't about to let him face this alone. A sudden movement on a ridge above made Isaiah freeze. 3 men, rifles raised, were following them. Not at a safe distance, dangerously close. He dismounted swiftly, pulling Clara down with him behind a boulder. "Stay low," he said, voice tight but calm. "Don't make a sound." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She felt the weight of Isaiah's presence beside her, calm, controlled, deadly, and it steadied her own shaking hands. The first man shouted a warning and Isaiah took aim with precise, practiced movements. He fired, not to kill but to startle, to make them hesitate. The crack of the rifle echoed across the canyon. The outlaws faltered, unsure of where the shot had come from. Clara felt her pulse spike. "Isaiah," she whispered, breathless. "I've got this," he said without looking at her. His tone was firm, reassuring, but carried the quiet warning that she should stay out of danger. When a second outlaw broke cover, Isaiah moved again, fluid, decisive, and in one controlled motion, disarmed the man and pressed him to the ground. His muscles were taut, every movement efficient. Clara's eyes widened in awe and fear. She had never seen someone handle threat with such precision. After the encounter, they pressed on, moving into a denser part of the canyon. Clara could feel her nerves settling slightly, her hand brushing against Isaiah's as she handed him water. The contact lingered, subtle but charged. "Why do you keep going?" she asked, voice low. "You could turn back, disappear, leave all this behind." Isaiah's gaze met hers for a fraction of a second before returning to the path ahead. "Because if I don't, people like you, good people, get hurt. And because running doesn't fix anything." Her breath caught. She understood, in a visceral way, the weight he carried. Not just from the bounty, not just from prejudice, but from the constant burden of responsibility, for her, for himself, for survival. Night fell faster than expected, shadows stretching across the canyon floor. Isaiah set up a small, concealed camp, keeping the fire low. Clara helped silently, glancing at him. "You're quiet," she said softly, brushing dust from her sleeve. "I need to think," he replied. His jaw tightened as he considered the coming day. "They'll be back in the morning. We have to be ready. Every route, every rock, every ridge matters." Clara nodded, understanding more than words could convey. She moved closer to him while feeding the horses. Their shoulders brushed again, and this time Isaiah didn't pull away. His hand moved subtly, guiding a rope around the saddle horn, and their fingers met. She didn't withdraw. The proximity, the danger, the shared focus, it all built a quiet, tense intimacy. Words weren't needed. Hours later, a distant whistle carried through the canyon. Isaiah froze, eyes sharp, ears listening. Clara's pulse spiked. The sheriff's men were back. He moved swiftly, repositioning the campfire and leading her to a more concealed alcove. "Stay here," he said quietly. "And whatever you do, don't move." She nodded, swallowing her fear. Watching him move with such confidence yet careful control, made her chest tighten, admiration, worry, and something unspoken stirring inside her. The night passed in near silence, punctuated by the occasional scrape or rustle. Isaiah kept watch, muscles tense, mind calculating escape routes, imagining every potential ambush, weighing risks, and silently preparing for confrontation at first light. Clara remained close, alert, yet increasingly aware of the emotional weight between them, the unspoken trust, the quiet protection, the subtle tension that neither dared address directly. By dawn, the canyon was bathed in pale light. Isaiah had a plan. They would leave the canyon, take a hidden path through the ridges, and put as much distance as possible between themselves and Cedar Bluff. Every step forward required split-second decision-making, balancing survival and speed. Before they mounted, Clara dared a glance at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Isaiah looked at her, expression unreadable for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Stay close," he said. "And don't lose sight of me." As they rode into the early morning light, the canyon walls narrowing behind them, both felt the quiet intensity of the moment. Danger, fear, and attraction intertwined, each step forward a testament to trust, courage, and unspoken desire. The first light of dawn stretched across Cedar Bluff, illuminating Main Street in harsh orange and gold. Dust rose from the street as Isaiah and Clara approached, riding side by side. Both were alert, senses sharpened by the long chase through the desert and canyon. The town was quiet, unnaturally so, the calm before the storm. Clara tightened her grip on the reins, horse's muscles tense beneath her. Her heart hammered, a mix of fear and anticipation. She hadn't expected to be part of a confrontation, but she refused to be left behind. Isaiah scanned the street, eyes narrowing at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Halden Briggs stood in the doorway, flanked by 3 deputies, guns half raised, their faces hard and expectant. He had been waiting for this moment. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed caution, but he knew hesitation could cost lives, theirs and innocent bystanders. He nudged his horse forward. "Halden Briggs," he called, voice steady, cutting through the morning air. "We don't have to do this." Briggs laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You've brought shame to this town, Cole. Now you'll pay." Isaiah's hand rested on the grip of his revolver. He didn't raise it yet, he wanted the first move to be calculated, precise. Clara's presence at his side anchored him, reminding him of what was at stake. Not pride, not vengeance, her safety. A deputy stepped forward, weapon ready. Isaiah's eyes flicked to Clara. She raised a rifle, steady and deliberate, aimed at the deputy's chest. The message was clear: any movement, any foolish step, and there would be consequences. The street was tense, silent except for the soft clopping of hooves and the morning wind. Isaiah's mind raced, calculations, options, escape routes, and contingencies. But he couldn't focus solely on strategy. He glanced at Clara and saw determination in her eyes, fear barely contained. Her courage grounded him in a way no desert night or canyon ambush had. Briggs drew a bead on Isaiah, voice hard. "Step down from that horse, Cole. It's over." Isaiah's gaze shifted slightly, reading the deputy's stances. Timing, angle, and restraint, he had faced men like this before. One wrong move and innocent lives could be lost. He nudged his horse forward slowly, keeping his revolver low but ready. "You won't control me, Briggs. And you won't touch her," Isaiah said, voice calm but full of authority. Clara's hand tightened on the rifle. "Try anything and it ends badly for you," she said. Her voice carried the weight of all the nights spent hiding, running, surviving. Briggs scowled. "You'll regret that, girl." The standoff was tense, measured. Every heartbeat stretched long. Isaiah noticed a deputy shift his weight, preparing for a step forward. In the blink of an eye, Isaiah drew his revolver, aiming with precision. He fired a warning shot, into the ground, sending dust flying between them. The deputy froze, hands half raised. The others hesitated. Isaiah's calm, unshakable focus and Clara's support made the threat tangible. Briggs' face darkened in anger, realizing he had underestimated them. "Enough," Isaiah said firmly, voice echoing down the street. "This ends now." Briggs raised his gun, but Isaiah had anticipated it. In 2 smooth motions he sidestepped and drew a second shot, disarming the sheriff. The deputies, witnessing their leader neutralized and the determination in Isaiah and Clara's eyes, lowered their weapons slowly. Clara exhaled, her body trembling slightly. "Is it over?" she whispered. Isaiah lowered his revolver, eyes scanning the street. "It's over. For now." They approached Briggs, tying him loosely with rope to prevent further trouble. Isaiah's movements were deliberate, careful. Not cruelty but control. Clara's hands brushed against his as she secured the knots, a small, intimate contact that made both aware of their closeness. "Let's go," Isaiah said, voice soft now, meant only for her. Clara nodded. They mounted their horses, side by side, feeling the quiet triumph of survival and the relief of shared victory. Cedar Bluff lay behind them, dust and gossip and prejudice fading with every step. Ahead, the horizon stretched open, uncertain but theirs. As they rode together, Isaiah finally glanced at Clara. "You stayed with me," he said, almost a question. "I didn't leave you," she replied. Her voice carried strength and warmth. "Not then. Not now. Not ever." He shifted closer, careful not to startle her, but close enough that the warmth of their bodies and the rhythm of their horses blended. For a moment, the danger, the chase, and the town's hatred felt distant. He tilted his hat back slightly, revealing a faint, tired smile. "Then we're in this together," he said. Clara smiled in return, leaning just slightly toward him. "Together?" she echoed. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the desert ahead. Dust swirled around them, but the horizon was wide, open, and full of possibility. Isaiah and Clara rode forward, side by side, hands brushing, hearts aligned, knowing that for once the world's prejudice couldn't reach them. They were free. Together. And nothing, no bounty, no sheriff, no town, could take that away.